It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie Kay.
Hello and welcome to the Onyx News Podcast. I'm Margie Kay, and this evening we have a little bit of an unusual show for you, but stick with me because I think you're going to find it very interesting. First, I do want to mention one of our latest books that Onyx Media published is All Monsters Are Human by Derek Smith, and this is an unsettling collection of horror stories, so if you're into that sort of thing, this is it. And since we're coming up on Halloween, I think that that's pretty appropriate. And another item we've got just for fun is a paranormal coloring book for adults. I use these in meditation training in my remote viewing workshops. So there you go. That's number 4 in the series of our coloring books. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Vril. And this is something I didn't know anything about until a couple of weeks ago. But something very strange happened to me. I was asleep and dreaming, and my husband said it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I dreamt that I was speaking in my sleep, which I have occasionally done, not very often, but sometimes. And the first time it occurred, so I'm gonna back up to 2012. Okay, this is when the first time it occurred that my husband witnessed it. My husband told me in the morning after we both woke up that in the middle of the night, I was speaking in another person's voice, not my own, and he did not understand what I was saying. And he tried to just gently wake me up, and he said, I said, Margie's not here right now. She'll be back later. And that scared the bejesus out of him. And he didn't say anything else. And then he waited until I fell asleep and wasn't talking anymore. And then told me about it in the morning. So fast forward 2 weeks ago. I dreamt that I was speaking in my sleep in an unknown language. And then when I woke up, my husband said to me, you were talking in your sleep again last night, and it was an unknown language. It didn't sound human. And then when I woke up in the morning for real, the first thing my husband really said to me was this exact same thing. You were talking in your sleep last night, and it sounded like a non-human language. It sounded alien. I did not recognize it, but it was a language. And I just said to him, well, what did it sound like? He says, I can't describe it. And then all of a sudden, a man's voice said to me, and I heard it in my head, I think it was Thor. One word, Vril. That was it. I've never heard that word before. I did not know what it meant. And so I got online, I looked at Wikipedia to get some answers, and then ordered a couple of books. I have not read them yet. But then I was in conversation with Tyler Kiwala recently. And so Tyler has some knowledge of this, and he's going to share it with us tonight. Tyler Kiwala is an ET experiencer, independent researcher, and passionate disclosure activist. Most popularly known in the awakening community for Journey to Truth podcast, hosted by himself and fellow disclosure activist Aaron Kuhn. Together, they've created a platform for discussing any and all controversial and eye-opening topics without limitations in an effort to spread awareness to the masses. Tyler's journey began with a levitation experience shortly after his mother's passing in 2011 that ended with intense paralysis and visitation from shadow people. This would lead to experiences with inner Earth beings, Sasquatch, Greys, reptilians, and recruitment attempts into covert military programs. Tyler is currently in the process of retrieving suppressed memories from what he believes are from his involvement with agencies within the shadow government. Welcome to the program, Tyler.
Hey, thank you for the wonderful intro, and I'm happy to be back on the show, and I'm super excited about tonight's topic. I'm very passionate about it, so thanks for having me.
Well, I was surprised to hear that you knew about what this was, what Vril meant, and I'm just really excited to hear your take on it and what the history of that may be. I did grab the two photos that you sent me, but also this old book from 1871.
The Coming Race.
Yes, The Coming Race. Vril, The Power of the Coming Race, originally published as The Coming Race, is a novel by Edward Bulwer Lytton, published anonymously in 1871. Some readers have believed the account of a superior subterranean master race and the energy form called Vril, at least in part. Some theosophists, notably Helena Blavatsky, William Scott Elliott, and Rudolf Steiner, accepted the book as based on occult truth in part. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
So what is your take on all of this?
So that book in particular, a lot of people believe it talks about the Vril is like, you can compare it to like the Force in Star Wars. It's just a free energy source that anyone can tap into, but it can also be harnessed and used to power time machines, UFOs, you name it, any of this stuff, any free energy devices that we would have. It's like working with the ether, but there's this whole narrative that there's a sun within the hollow earth that is powered by this Vril energy, and it can be harnessed. And I think that's what the Coming Race talks about. A lot of people, we hear about the black sun from the Vril Damen and the Thule and the Nazi Society and stuff. We see that black sun depicted. Some people argue that black sun is actually referring to the Vril power source within the planet. And there does seem to be a German history. If you read all the inner Earth accounts, it goes way back to the 1500s, potentially earlier, of a race that speaks a German dialect. They're very tall, living within the planet. And they can, maybe some call them the Aryan race, which is what the Coming Race is referring to. And this is why Hitler was on such a mission to basically, they were trying to preserve that bloodline. So they were trying to basically perfect the Aryan race and weed out everyone from Germany who wasn't blonde hair, blue eye, who they didn't think were true pure-blooded Aryans. And that was one of the driving factors for a lot of Hitler's behavior back then. And this is all arguable and debatable, but this is just some of the stuff I researched. The Vril, now we get into the Vril Damen, the Vril Society, which is a group of psychic women, channelers, in the early 1900s, who were working with, I'm going to put it in a nutshell first, and then we can expand on it, who were working with German scientists. And what they were doing was, their story is, they were trying to get back home to Aldebaran, the planet Aldebaran, where they claim to be from. Somehow their lineage, they got basically trapped on Earth for generations, and they were waiting for us to evolve enough to where we could actually build them a ship, help them build a ship to get home. And it just happened to be that they were located in that region of the world before World War II, or during World War I and World War II. And the Germans just happened to be ahead of anyone else on the planet at the time as far as their technological advancements and free energy and all this stuff. So these Vril were channeling blueprints for a craft, which is essentially a time machine, the way they describe it, to get them back home off of Earth. They were trapped here. And most of the blueprints were in another language. They speak another language. A lot of them were in hieroglyphs, like some sort of weird, not Egyptian hieroglyphs, but some sort of hieroglyphics like that. And they all had to be translated to German so these German scientists could help them build a craft to get back home. And that's where that's in a nutshell. And March 11th, 1945 was the last time anyone heard from them. And it was always been speculation that they just went back home. But I have since come across some material. I have notes here that it's a released classified document from the Air Force that quite literally says very specifically on March 11th, 1945, they all left. And I can read a segment from that. But there's also a diary from his name is Baron Wilhelm Spottenheim. And it's a diary, his personal diary, that has been released by Sean David Morton, who was killed for releasing it. But it basically diaries his entire time working with these Vril Damen and building this flying saucer, which became the building blocks for the secret space program and the German flying saucer program. And there's a whole history there, and there's a lot of politics involved. And to be honest, a lot of the diary is kind of like you're just reading someone's diary. It's not like super compelling stuff, but then there's amazing information mixed in with it. But you kind of have to understand the whole story to see what really happened. And it just basically covers 30 years of missing history that the world really doesn't understand unless you're reading this material. So the Vril Damen were beautiful women. They did not cut their hair. They believed that their hair helped them channel, and they had they could perform miracles, is what people would say, because they were just tapping in. They were all virgins, by the way, and they were just tapping into their true potential because they were actually remembered. They were from another planet. They didn't have amnesia like us, and they could do things that other people couldn't, which gave them pull. And basically the German government at the time and anyone of influence within Nazi Germany was very interested in these women because these women were predicting things in Germany, and they thought they had the gift of foresight. So like Hitler and a lot of these people involved, they thought this was a valuable asset for war because they can see what was coming before it happened, and these women proved it. So there's more, and I'll let you ask a question, but
yeah. Okay, well, you're blowing my mind right now because when this occurred to me, when I heard the name Vril, I also, along with that, was an urgency to find out the story. So I knew it was urgent, not only for me, but for everybody to know. So when I heard that there's a theory that there is a subterranean race that does want to come up out into the open on the planet and take over the planet, I thought, oh, I think we do need to know about that if that's the case. But everything you're talking about right now is fascinating. And now you mentioned the Vril women. Are there Vril men?
At this time, no. There was just 6 of them, I think. Well, technically 9 total by the end of it all. Okay. And they were all slowly recruited by this one woman who had claimed to have been living here. She was like hundreds of years old, blonde, blue eye, very beautiful. She claims to have been living here for generations, and she had eventually. Humanity we had evolved enough to where she could start recruiting these women and creating the Vril Society. And she was teaching these women how to tap into their abilities as well. But they were all part of the same bloodline. And she understood that. They didn't quite yet. It's like a starseed remembering who they are eventually,
Yes.
It's kind of like that. So she was helping them, but she needed them because she needed them to help bring in all this information, because it ended up being just pages and pages and books of stuff that they needed to actually give these German scientists so they could have something that they could understand, not only understand, but build. And they kind of coached them through it. But it was, there was no men that I know of. Now, of course, there were men of this bloodline, but this specific thing I'm talking about, the Vril Damen, was a group of women.
And that's kind of scary that they went. Obviously, the Germans were more technologically advanced, but I just wonder if they knew what the Germans were going to be doing with this technology. And, if they knew that they had contacted a group that wasn't so great, they had ill intentions.
Right here, this answers your question. This is from Baron Wilhelm Spottenheim's diary. And this is a quote that he wrote from Sigrun, the girl who is the lead girl. I think lot of people think it was Maria Orsic. That there's a whole story behind that, but there was a woman kind of behind Maria that was pulling all the strings. And when they finally asked her, because they realized like there was an ulterior motive for these girls too. And basically she said, I use people to save an idea that is being stomped out in the universe as we perceive it. That is what we are doing here. And that is why I use the Nazis to their own end. They won't win anything. They will leave another burned out civilization behind them and millions dead. Yet there has to be hope that someplace peace can be achieved and protected. That is my job. I am so very, very, very tired of it. And then she basically admits they were using the Nazis, but and this is what happened. Basically, they did build a craft without the Nazis. They were able to recruit enough civilians to help them build a craft, and they crashed it on the test flight. They had no funding to build another one, so they proved to Hitler, Hans Kammler, Karl Haushofer, Spottenheim, Otto Schumann, who came up with the Schumann resonance, all these German scientists. They were able to prove their abilities to them to get their attention and said, listen, if you fund us, we can build you one of these craft. We'll build ourselves one to get home, and we'll teach you how to build one to do whatever you want with it. So they were, in fact, using the Germans, but the version, the blueprints that they gave the German scientists, they left out specific key components so they couldn't turn it into a weapon, which in the history books, it really does. You can read about how the Germans were very frustrated. They couldn't figure out how to mount guns on these things. They could just like float around, but it was like a horrible craft for war strategy, which is what they wanted it for. But they did that intentionally so they wouldn't destroy the world with this technology and just haphazardly misuse time travel, because that's end up what happening anyway. But there's a whole wild story behind it. I can go any number of directions you want, but I'll let you chime in.
So is that what is behind the German bell, the time travel device?
100%. So that actually came after they had built a successful saucer. And the bell this was the proposition to the German government. They said, we can build you a device that can drop off a nuclear bomb behind enemy lines in a fraction of a second and leave without a trace. Basically, the bell's design was to literally transport a bomb via time travel behind basically a teleporter and literally drop a bomb off and then leave and pop back. And before they knew what happened, the bomb would be exploded. The first time they tested it, it killed a bunch of people in the facility because they didn't actually know what they were doing. A lot of the women weren't involved in the project at this point. The German scientists were very hard-headed, and they didn't follow the prints to the specifications like they should have. They ended up getting it to work, but what happened was it killed a bunch of people first. It took off and disappeared in the skies above the facility, and it time traveled 20 years in the future to Kecksburg, Pennsylvania in 1965, where if you go to the Kecksburg UFO incident, bell-shaped craft crash landed in the woods there. At that point, we had Operation Paperclip, which was German scientists embedded within our infrastructure, the military-industrial complex, and at the head of all the major corporations in the United States. So on that UFO crash retrieval team were some Germans who knew what the bell was because they were German scientists that came here through Project Paperclip. They knew immediately what they were looking at when they saw it. The Americans, not so much. But this was, I don't know the politics of all that, but there was a group of people that knew, okay, the bell worked. We just didn't have any control of where it was going. And obviously that sparked a whole other side quest with time travel in the United States.
Oh my goodness. We've opened a rabbit hole here, haven't we?
Yeah.
Now, there's another story that about a complete different group called Vril or something like it that are supposed to be reptilian types, and those are the ones that want to come up and take over the world. What do you know about that?
So I don't know a whole lot about that. I know what you're talking about, and I think there's some confusion in the narratives because the Aryan race allegedly is an underground race. They call themselves the New Atlanteans. There's a story dating back all the way to the 1500s of evidence of German civilization discovering this inner Earth society, right? Mm-hmm. And there definitely is history of the Germans, Karl Haushofer, working in Tibet with the Black Dragon Society, the Green and the Black Dragon Society, which were channeling reptilians, quite literally subterranean reptilians, and they were like getting this whole master plan that was eventually like this 5,000-year plan that was to be given to Hitler, which is exactly what Karl Haushofer did. And so there seemed to be a reptilian presence behind, a subterranean reptilian presence behind a lot of the Nazis' moves and a lot of their motives. But there was also this subterranean Aryan race. And I personally believe they were separate, but I think a lot of people who aren't like reading, like doing a lot of research, they can seem like it's just one lump sum group down there. And I think there's two different stories going on at the same time. And even some of these German scientists, if you read the diary, they actually they hated the Nazis. They didn't want to be a part of the Nazi party, but they understood that they had to obey orders too, or they would be killed. So a lot of the Nazis didn't even want to be Nazis. And this is something we don't consider. So there was a lot of people on the inside that were trying to escape and get out, while Hitler just was power hungry. And he actually kind of went against some of his own orders from his superiors, whoever he was getting them from, and kind of destroyed their whole plan because he just got power hungry. And, there's a whole history there.
Well, as we know, a lot of Nazis came to America, Nazi scientists, and
right.
and our government used them in many projects, many top secret projects. And so I wonder what they brought with them about the Vril. What kind of technology and information did they bring that would assist America?
Well, so that was just it. Actually, if you watch the latest Indiana Jones movies, The Dial of Destiny, the antagonist in that movie, I don't know what he goes by, what name he goes by in the movie, but I looked it up. And that character is modeled after Wernher von Braun, who was the German scientist who led NASA. He was the head of NASA post-World War II. And according to this information, he was set that the whole purpose of the German scientists coming over here were to keep America distracted with rockets while they were doing their saucer program. So he was in charge of the rocket program because that was his job, to make sure that we were focused on rockets instead of flying saucers, according to this. And if you watch the latest Indiana Jones movie, it literally tells that story.
Wow.
It tells a story, but they don't use Wernher von Braun's name, but that's exactly who that character was modeled after. And that movie is about time travel. So Wernher von Braun in that movie is a time traveler, and he's after some ancient relic, the Dial of Destiny, which can help them detect a fissure in time, which is important because they can detect when and where somebody is going to be popping in or out, and they can then identify the threat instead of not knowing.
Okay, well, this is interesting, and I want to hear a lot more. Probably we probably don't have enough time to discuss everything tonight, but we'll get to it, and we'll be back right after these messages, talking with Tyler Kiwala this evening.
The Unnext Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Kathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unnext Network website at unnextnetwork.com. That's unnextnetwork.com.
And we're back. This is Unnext News. I'm your host, Margie Kay. We're talking with Tyler Kiwala this evening. He is the host of the Journey to Truth podcast and also hosts the Rebels of Disclosure conference. Let me just ask you about that real quick before we lose anything, get out of time here. What about your next conference? Where's that going to be?
Next one's in Hawaii, actually. It's not called Rebels of Disclosure. It's just called Journey to the Big Island, and April 20th through the 24th. And it's kind of like a vacation conference / retreat. We're going to be swimming with dolphins and whales, going to sacred sites. Plus, we'll be at a venue, which is a community center, and we'll have some speakers there. Only about 9 speakers, not many. It's going to be a conference / retreat. And you can go to get information, journeytotruth.online. I just updated the website, and we'll be finalizing the lineup here shortly, hopefully.
Absolutely fantastic. That sounds wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And you recently moved to Sedona, so how do you like it there?
It's amazing. It's great to just change things up. I lived in St. Louis for 38 years, and I was getting a little stagnant. I was in my house for 12 years. I just needed a change. And I moved out here. I'm getting in better shape. I'm just feeling better energetically. It's just a nice change of scenery, new motivation for life. So it's been great.
Do you notice the energy there? It's so positive. I've been there and experienced it. And in fact, I went out to the rocks, and the energy was so overwhelming that after about an hour, I felt like I was getting super vertigo and feeling like I was going to faint. I understand it takes some getting used to.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole Sedona can be its own episode, but yeah, I 100%. The energy is potent. The vortex energy is measurable here. It's very real. Some days it fluctuates. Some days are intense for everyone. Some days are a lot lighter. It just depends. But I mean, everything. It seems like the spiritual journey is accelerated here. And I don't know how to describe that, but that's just what it feels like. And there's a lot of positive energy here. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Okay, back to the Vril. Well, you've done a deep dive into this. You've studied it. What else can you tell us about it?
So a number of things. So we're working with 2 diaries here. The original diary from the German scientist, and then another diary. It's a whole other story. It's really a long time to explain. Yes, that's the one I'm referring to right now. But with that diary was found within another set of diaries from another man who spent 40 years in the shadow government. And when he was reviewing this diary, he just thought it was strange. One of the notes that he made was, I started to look at dates in the sheets, rosters, schedules, maintenance reports, and all other kinds of supporting documents. Everything stopped on the same day, March 11th, 1945. What is so special about March 11th, 1945? Well, we have a declassified document from the Air Force, which anyone can find online probably at this point, but it's listed in this book. And the document is a conversation between the Army personnel, Air Force personnel, and Winfield Otto Schumann. And if anybody knows or has heard of the Schumann resonance, this is the guy who discovered the Schumann resonance.
Mhm.
And he discovered that because he was on the project when they got the first flying saucer to power up. They built it. They still didn't understand how it worked. And he was fascinated where it was drawing its energy from. He could not figure out where it was drawing its energy from. And it inspired him to research that and look into that and investigate it. And that's where he discovered the Earth was resonating at a specific frequency, 783 hertz, and it was named after him. So it was because of the German flying saucer program that he even discovered the Schumann resonance. And actually, interestingly enough, this guy, he wasn't the greatest guy. When you read about him, like, we would not like him today if he was in our government. I find it interesting that we still tie his name to the Schumann resonance because he was not for humanity. I'll just say that.
Well,
anyway,
we're kind of using it against him now.
Right, exactly. But we have him to thank for discovering it, helping us discover it. But okay, so this is from a declassified Army Air Force document that came from Wright-Patterson Army Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, 1968, August 27th. And it says neither of the original Army, then the newly formed Air Force officers that interviewed the subject are currently on active duty with the services. So anybody who conducted this interview aren't even alive to ask about the legitimacy of this conversation. But nevertheless, here it is documented. But there's one specific thing I want to note. So the Air Force was basically they were throwing everything they had at him. He was under the spotlight, on the hot seat, I guess you could say. And they were asking him why? What was the purpose of this flying saucer program? What did these women want? And he basically said to move people. And he said, yes, 19 flights in 3 days, 2,261 people in total. Each time seven was the nickname for the craft they were using to get to Aldebaran. Each time it came back, it looked worse and worse. Old, beaten, like it had been through war. We would spend a few hours repairing it as fast as we could. Then we would send it again. In less than 1 hour, it was back. But our downtime for repairs were getting longer and longer. We had learned that the life support only had to last for 40 minutes total. We used a one-off U-boat to keep everyone alive inside, lithium hydroxide canisters, and a ventilating system driven by fans, whatever. So basically what they're saying is in March 11th, 1945, it actually took them 3 days to do this. They moved 2,261 people off of planet Earth back to the planet Aldebaran through this craft. And the way the craft is described, it's not traveling through space like we think. It quite literally opens a portal in the sky. It pops through a time tunnel, and it took them virtually 40 minutes to get to across the galaxy, however many light years away, to get these people back. But it would be 40 minutes Earth time. But for them, it was like 100 years past. So every time the craft came back, it looked like it had just been decades old and destroyed. And so they were only able to get 19 flights out of it. And the last 20 people, there was like virtually 20 people left that had to go. And the craft never came back after the 19th flight. So there's still 20 people left here of that Aryan race from that planet that basically just had to stay here. And it's just super interesting. But they're also, in one of their own diaries, they also talk about this very specifically, about how many trips it would take. Whenever they were explaining to the German scientists, they already knew that they were only going to get so many trips out of it before it expired, because Earth at that time, we didn't have the proper materials to build a craft that could actually withstand the time field space.
Well, yeah, hundreds of years it would have been in use. Wow.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, and let me see. Here's what it. let me see if I can find it. Well, this is her explaining to one of the scientists. We're only going to have one shot to get this right. The fate of many civilizations depends on this. In reality, the fate of yours as well, but not at this point. The timeline is moving, and there will be those that come after you that make sure the same journey and fight the same battles, that make the same journey and fight the same battles just for different reasons, yet they're connected. She goes on, basically explaining how the universe works and why this is important, and that there is an imposing what they call a Sumerian threat, like the Anunnaki Sumerians. According to her, they basically kind of like they were wardens. They monitored all space air traffic coming and going from not just our planet, but multiple planets. And this craft in particular was a way to basically fly under the radar and leave the planet without this Sumerian stopping them, because nobody was allowed to leave. The planet was quite literally being watched by the Sumerian race and whatever crafts they were in. And they needed this time machine, essentially. It looks like a flying saucer, but it's a time machine that literally uses dimensional shift technology. It technically travels in another dimension. This way it can't be detected. And this is what they came up with to get off the planet back home to their people. And it's just a fascinating story. But there was something else I have all these notes. I can't even, here it is right here. She says, I have 736 people that need to be transported from here to there, 9 trips in the craft. By then it will be barely holding together because the hull and the motor time on it will be measured in centuries. So basically, it took them 3 days to do 19 trips, but the craft experienced centuries of damage because of the way time works in space, according to here, compared to here. So, I mean, we have a fascinating story in history, and they left in 1945, but the Germans still had access to this technology, and they kept developing these craft until they perfected it, and they figured out. They left problems in it for them intentionally so they wouldn't, they wanted them to just hit dead ends, but they eventually broke through that. And, they went down, you heard of Operation High Jump, there's a whole history of the German flying saucer program, which ended up with them going to the moon, even Mars. There's documents of that way early on, way before the Apollo missions.
Yeah. Yeah, I know several people who said that they worked on the Mars and Moon programs quite some time ago in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
So, yeah, there definitely has been stuff going on there. But this also reminds me that there have been a number of cases lately where people have actually gotten video of what looks like a portal opening. There's a flash, there's a white light, and then an object comes out, some type of a craft, maybe it's saucer shape or something else, or a cube or something like that. Right. And it looks like we are using that technology, or somebody is using it on our planet. Some type of human group has figured this out, and they've perfected it, and now they are using it.
Yeah, 100%. I wish I knew where it was in the book, but she says basically it's the only practical way to travel the universe, travel the galaxy, is literally to travel through this portal system, to try and break through the atmosphere and go on a long journey. She said it's possible, but it would take you so long that by the time you got to where you were going, you would forget why you were even going there in the first place, because it would be a whole new generation. Like, it's just would take that long. And actually today I just saw an article that I shared about a proposed plan for scientists unveiled design for a 36-mile long interstellar generation ship that's capable of carrying 2,400 people on a one-way trip to Alpha Centauri. It would take them 400 years. And whoa. This is like, it's if all this stuff is true, you have to wonder, like, the people in this think tank that are coming up with this plan for this craft are obviously left in the dark about their actual technology that we have. And this could be part of some narrative they just want the public believing it's going to take us years to get wherever,
And they probably really are going to use the other technology.
Yeah. And according to, there's people that say that's actually kind of how we got to the moon. We use a technology similar to what I just described when we did go, but the rocket roost was quite literally the dog and pony show. But there's evidence here that they did actually go to the moon. I know a lot of people think we didn't go because the footage was faked. The footage was faked because they couldn't reveal the technology, how they actually got there. And it wasn't in a rocket, the traditional rocket.
Uh-huh.
And it's all speculation. It's not like I can prove any of this, but that's just what I've researched.
Yeah, when you think about it, the media, film, were talking about rockets in the 1930s, in the 20s, even
Right.
in the movies. So this is old idea technology, and I've heard a lot. I've heard a lot about this that is not being used, and it would make sense if there was something much more practical, faster, easier. And then, of course, we have this evidence of wormholes and portals. And
Right.
I witnessed a portal myself a few years ago. I was working on the book Winged Aliens, and I was just finishing up the book, and I was sitting on my deck, and I thought, I wonder if these creatures, specifically Mothman and other types of entities, are coming in and going out through portals, because there's never a body found. You never see one standing in person in the middle of a crowd. None of that. And so my answer came because I saw a flash. This circle opened up. Believe it or not, golden colored fairy flew across. Another portal opened, and she flew into it, and they closed. That was my answer. I mean, I was just thinking the question that just showed me, yes, there are portals, and they can obviously be created. Last night, I was doing a meditation, and I said, how are portals created? And one word came in: thought.
Right.
Thought.
So actually, that was the one thing the Germans couldn't understand. There's no blueprints for the controls. They couldn't figure out, like, how do you control this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And she explained that right here, you have asked each other the questions, where are the controls? There are none in the main craft. It's an elevator of sorts that works on consciousness and thoughts. You just basically, they had to learn how to control it with their mind. And the opening the portal in particular, I don't know about that, but to control the craft, it was just a consciousness-based system. They didn't even understand, but they knew how to use it because, they were taught. But it's just because you know how to use your phone doesn't mean you know how it was built and how it works, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But one of the things I will say, so she explains the dangers of time travel. And this is just something I found very interesting. And this is, I recommend everybody to read it all. It's just full of, it's like reading an anatomy book and trying to memorize it in the first try. Like, you just can't. But they said using time compression with space flight is expected and approved by basically spacefaring races. So using time compression with space flight is expected and approved. Using it by itself is a capital crime in the universe, meaning creating a time machine that a human can go through, or a device that just using it by itself without a ship, without being authorized. It's a capital crime in the universe. There are levels of control in the universe that have been in place for millions of years. When a planet reaches the point of understanding the nature of splitting the atom and using that power, the first level set of monitors is sent to start watch. So they send a group of monitors to monitor the planet whenever we do that. When a rocket levels the atmosphere, the next level comes into play. If the rocket has sentient beings on board, that level is escalated. When someone learns to move through time, a much bigger problem shows up on their doorstep. And if they cannot defend their actions, those systems are shut down. Meaning, defend your actions. Why are you using time travel? Mm-hmm. It's all about control and the hierarchy of the powers in the universe, from the local level, which normally is a planetary system, to the quadrant of the galaxy, which is where the heavy hitters play. And she's basically going on describing, like, Space is not what we think. Like we think we're just going to go out there and discover everything for the first time. This is a million-year-old game, millions of years old, you know, and there's already people out there with their own space programs, you know, monitoring the galaxy. So,
yeah, and here we are on Earth just trying to convince people that there are such things as non-human
right,
entities that are sentient beings and intelligent species, and
right,
those of us who have been in the game for a while absolutely know that that's true.
yeah,
And but for a lot of people, because look, this stuff isn't taught in school.
mm-mm.
Nobody knows the truth unless they go digging for it or run into, you know, they have a sighting themselves, or an ET walks in their yard. Then they know. But
Right.
for the most part, that doesn't occur. What are your thoughts on why we don't have a constant disclosure going on? Why aren't ETs walking among us all over the planet right now?
Well, I would argue that maybe they are. In some cases, they're in human form and we wouldn't recognize them. In fact, that's what I've read in a number of books. But and sometimes you see people that don't quite fit in, but you would never know unless you knew, right? I would say as far as why we don't have active disclosure is because the government doesn't like what they can't control. And according to this material, the government is kind of left out of the loop on a lot of these black projects anyway. They've created a shadow government that needs no congressional oversight, meaning they just bypass the entire government entirely. And they're creating these space programs and all these other things and these time travel devices with no congressional oversight, never having to go through the president or anyone in Congress. They've built their own shadow government that, in fact, is so powerful. You know, the government, the traditional government that we understand, has to bow down to them. And it's kind of like this, you know, and there's this hierarchy of potentially some form of alien overlords, you know, pulling the strings on the whole thing. Who knows? But there's the reason we don't get that disclosure is because the government isn't actually, they don't have their hands on all of the truth. It's very compartmentalized. And a lot of guys in these programs, David Grush and everybody that's coming out, they do have bits and pieces of the puzzle, and they're sharing their testimony as they understand it, but they don't have the full picture. And I would argue that nobody has the full picture. So there's not one person that's going to come out and give you the answers because they quite literally don't know. They only understand the program that they were read into, and that's it. And there's a lot of blackmail, a lot of treason. People have blood on their hands. They've been lying to us for a century now. And they're not going to come out and tell on themselves. They're trying to disclose this stuff, find a way to disclose this stuff without telling on themselves, right? I mean, right. They're not going to just, because then we would have to question the integrity of the military-industrial complex, the government, everything that we've learned to trust and give our power to. They don't want to give up that power. So they're not going to undermine themselves. They're trying to dance around it. And suddenly this year, we have all these breakthrough discoveries and all these articles leaking that, oh, we found a way to teleport an object. We found a way to do this. We can, Elon Musk is working on a warp capable motor that can travel, you know, all this stuff. It's like all of a sudden somebody gave them the green light to start leaking these articles and these documents out. And I think it's just their way of disclosing it without telling on themselves. Their hand might be forced at some point by extraterrestrials or by a certain race that's just had enough of humans. And we'll see, maybe that's happening behind the scenes. But I think the politics of it are quite complicated, and a lot more complicated than most people can comprehend, because we're talking about things that aren't supposed to exist, and even interdimensional politics. I mean, our government's working cross-dimensionally, and there's whistleblowers that talk about that too. It's a much bigger picture.
Yeah, and we'll probably never see the entire picture, because I think there are approximately 17 different government agencies that work on Black Ops programs, and they're compartmentalized, like you said.
Right.
Now, I want to, since we're getting close on time, the 20 Vril who were left behind, where are they now?
That's a great question. So some of these, like Sigrun, the lead woman, could live hundreds of years. That's just her DNA. I don't know if these people live that long as well. I would argue that they went back to Inner Earth. There's a narrative that after World War II, the Germans that didn't go off planet went to either Argentina or Antarctica. Both have entrances to the subterranean world, and it's all well documented depending on what books you read and where you research it and all that stuff. But in my personal opinion, they did not stay on the surface. They probably reunited with their brothers and sisters and underground somewhere, but probably in Antarctica, if I had to guess.
Ah, yeah, I was going to say Argentina for Hitler because there's a lot of evidence that that's where he went.
Yeah, actually, that's you get to read about that here. So in this book,
are they readily available?
Yeah. So after Sean died, the books just disappeared off of Amazon, but his wife somehow got him back on to Amazon. And so they're readily available now. But for a minute there after he died, you were going to pay hundreds of dollars for one of these books because people were selling them on eBay and stuff. And like I said, this is like kind of blows the lid on their whole cover story. And this is just book 6 of what's going to be a 9-book series. Sean actually finished book 8 and 9 before he died. But they weren't complete, so his wife is editing them now, and book 8 is going to be released in this fall, basically to continue. It's a whole long, drawn-out story of this man's 40-year experience in the shadow government, but only book 6 is a verbatim diary. Now, within the other books, there are documents and actual. You there?
Yeah, got you back.
Within the other books, there are documents and declassified stuff and segments of the original diaries, but it's just you really have to read it all to really get the big picture. Once I started reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, like it was answering all these questions that were always just left hanging when we watch these UFO programs and all this stuff. And it was filling in so many blanks for me. It was just a no-brainer. But you can get the books on Amazon right now, Sands of Time or StrangeUniverseRadio.com. You can get them directly from Sean's wife. She'll mail them to you personally. And so I can give you that website.
StrangeUniverseRadio.com. Okay.
Yeah. But what they say about Hitler in here is so it documents like how basically his whole death in this old diary. And they claim that he died but was replaced by a clone, and there was a whole cloning program that they discussed back then too. And one letter was sent to Maria Orsic, who became basically Hitler's, like, people don't know if they were dating or sleeping together or what, but she became his personal aide because she had the ability of foresight and she had these psychic abilities, so he wouldn't make a decision without going through her. She received a letter after he died, but then he really wasn't dead because she was still with him. It was a whole complicated story, but she received a letter that said, pay attention to the differences. And that's all it said. Pay attention to the differences, and meaning within Hitler. So apparently, according to this material, it's the clone that went to Argentina for whatever reason. I don't know. Like you got to read it. It's all right there. But yeah, sounds crazy, I know. But there is a movie, The Boys from Brazil is a movie that was, I forget what year it came out. The entire premise of the movie is about them trying to clone Hitler. And it's a whole program. And there was a guy named George Green. He's dead now, but he was a whistleblower on Project Camelot with Carrie Cassidy. And he came out and could not stress enough. He goes, that movie is direct disclosure of the cloning program, and they were trying to clone Hitler, and they might have done it, is what he said. And so The Boys from Brazil, if you want to watch that movie, it basically talks about that. So if they did successfully clone him, then maybe that's who went to Antarctica. And I know this is getting woo, but I mean, our history in this planet isn't what we think it is. So.
Oh, exactly. Now, we've got XCon coming up in September, the the 27th, the 28th, you are going to be speaking. Do you want to tell us real quick in about 1 minute what you're going to be talking about?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about I've had 2 recruitment attempts into these programs. One was very real, tangible recruitment attempts by real people, not some like memory I got back. There was one guy who was trying to bring me into a Mars program. I didn't believe it. That was in 2017. I didn't even understand the secret space program yet. This was before my whole awakening. I'm going to tell that story. And then secondly, in 2022, I had another man from the Navy. He was a warrant officer recruitment specialist, and his job was to recruit gifted starseeds into the programs. And he basically gave me a proposition. He proposed a recruitment a possibility for me, and there's a whole story with that. And I'm just going to tell those 2 stories and how real it got for me and what I learned about the programs from that. So.
Okay, well, that's going to be fascinating. Your talks are always very interesting and thought-provoking, and I appreciate you coming on the show tonight, Tyler, to share your information about the Vril with us. I really have gone down the rabbit hole on this. Now I'm going to have to read all those books you talked about.
Yeah.
So guess I know what I'm going to be doing the next 3 months.
Yeah,
but
I recommend it. They're great reads. I mean, it's so captivating. You almost binge read them like you binge watch a Netflix series. Like I couldn't put them down. Like I read the first 3 books in 1 month, and they're like 500-page books. Like I could not stop. And then you get further along, and then you get to book 6, where you're like, oh my god! Like if this is a real diary, this needs to be a documentary. It needs to be a movie. Everyone needs to know about it. It can't just stay in these pages. That's why I started becoming so passionate about it, and people just need to know.
Oh boy. All right. Thanks so much, Tyler, for coming on and sharing that information with us this evening. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
See you later. Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. See you here next week, 6 p.m. Central Time.